All right, so AI and policing in the EU. Huh. You didn't just skim a headline, you went deep into Europol's whole report.
Well, got to stay informed, right?
Absolutely. And this Europol report, it's their roadmap, basically, right, for how law enforcement uses AI.
Yeah, it's a big deal. They're really trying to get ahead of the curve using AI effectively, but also ethically,
Yeah.
which is kind of a tough balancing act these days.
No kidding. So what's the headline here? What's their main takeaway?
They're saying AI is a game changer, not just a new tool, but something that's going to completely change how policing works,
Yeah.
especially with all the data out there now.
Okay, I can see that. But this is where my mind goes straight to like Minority Report. Are we talking about predicting crimes before they happen?
It's funny you should mention that because the report actually uses the term predictive policing.
No way. Are they really?
Oh, yeah. They even give an example from the Netherlands. They have a system called CAS that analyzes crime data, weather, even social media, to try and anticipate where crimes might happen, like burglaries, for instance.
So they're using it to figure out where to focus patrols and stuff.
Exactly. The idea is to be more proactive, more visible in potential hotspots, deterring crime, not just reacting to it after the fact.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. I can get behind that. But what about like predicting who is going to commit a crime? That seems a lot more ethically dicey.
Yeah, the report makes a clear distinction there, predicting where versus predicting who. They say focusing on location is a lot less ethically problematic.
Good, because that whole Minority Report scenario really freaks me out.
I hear you. But beyond just predictive policing, the report also talks about how AI can help with, like, massive data sets.
Oh, right, like that whole EncroChat thing a few years back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cracking that encrypted network gave them access to millions and millions of messages. Way too much for humans to go through in any reasonable amount of time.
Right, it would take them years to analyze all of it.
Exactly. So they used AI. The report talks about how it helped them sift through all that data, find the important messages, identify key players in these criminal networks. Led to a ton of arrests.
Wow, okay, so that's AI sifting through data, but what about the more, I don't know, futuristic sounding stuff? Biometrics and all that.
Oh, that's definitely a big part of it too. And it's getting really advanced, like way beyond just fingerprinting. We're talking facial recognition that can identify a suspect from a blurry security camera image, even if their face is partially hidden.
Hold on a second, that's kind of scary. What about privacy? That seems like it could be misused so easily.
Yeah, that's a huge concern. And the report talks about that too. The EU has this thing called the AI Act. Have you heard of it?
Vaguely, it rings a bell.
Well, the AI Act puts some pretty strict limits on how facial recognition can be used,
Yeah.
especially in public spaces. Like,
Yeah.
no randomly scanning everyone's faces on the street.
So no Minority Report stuff.
Not quite. There are exceptions, but they're very specific. Like if there's an imminent terrorist threat or a missing child. Situations where there's a real immediate danger.
Okay, so it's very tightly controlled.
Very. Even
Yeah.
that. It requires, like, judicial oversight and all that.
Mm.
It's not taken lightly.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better. But what about facial recognition after a crime has already been committed, like analyzing security footage? Is that allowed?
Good question. The report actually distinguishes between real-time and post-event facial recognition. Analyzing CCTV footage after the fact is allowed, but again, it's very regulated.
So it's not a free-for-all.
Not at all. Anytime facial recognition is used by law enforcement, it has to be justified, proportionate to the threat, and with really strong safeguards in place.
Got it. So it's not just, hey, let's scan everyone's faces and see what we find.
Nope, not in the EU at least.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
But facial recognition is really just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Totally. AI is being used to enhance all sorts of biometric tech.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, we've got iris scans, which are already pretty common, but now they're using AI to make them even more accurate. And then there's voice recognition, which is getting really good. But one of the craziest ones is gait analysis.
Gait analysis.
Yeah. They can analyze how someone walks to identify them.
Get out of here.
Is that even accurate?
It's getting there. Like I said, it's still early days for a lot of this tech, but it's advancing incredibly fast. And that's kind of the point this report is trying to make,
Which is?
that we need to be thinking about the implications of all this now, because it's moving really fast.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure we're using this technology responsibly and ethically.
For sure. It's all very impressive, but it's also kind of terrifying when you really think about it. Like, how do we make sure these incredibly powerful tools aren't misused?
That's the million-dollar question. And that's where the EU AI Act comes in. But we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay, so this EU AI Act, it's supposed to be like the guardrails for all this AI stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. It's the world's first real attempt to regulate AI in a comprehensive way, not just like piecemeal laws here and there.
Ambitious. So how does it work?
Well, think of it like a traffic light system for AI applications. Some things get a red light, too risky, banned outright.
Red light ban. Give me some examples. What kind of AI is on the EU's naughty list?
So imagine a system that's designed to manipulate people's behavior, like in a harmful way, you know, or those social scoring systems some countries use where they judge your trustworthiness based on your online activity. That kind of thing is a hard no in the EU.
Yeah, I'm okay with that being a no-go zone. So that's red light. What about yellow light?
Yellow light is high risk.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of the law enforcement applications we've been talking about fall.
So, like, what? Give me the rundown.
Biometric identification systems are a big one. Facial recognition, iris scans, anything that identifies you based on your unique physical characteristics.
Okay, yeah, I can see why that would be considered high risk. What else?
Systems that analyze personal data to predict things like whether someone's likely to commit a crime or even become a victim of a crime.
See, that's the stuff that really makes me nervous. So it's high risk, but not banned completely. What's to stop these systems from being misused?
Well, that's where the AI Act gets really specific. For anything classified as high risk, there are strict rules. Rigorous testing, high data quality standards, human oversight. It's all designed to make sure these systems are accurate, unbiased, and transparent as possible.
So a lot more hoops to jump through than just buying the latest AI gadget and letting it loose on the streets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the EU we're talking about. They don't mess around when it comes to regulation. There's even this tool they've developed called CC4AI.
CC something something AI. Another one of those acronyms only a lawyer could love.
Pretty much.
Hmm.
But it's actually a pretty useful tool, believe it or not. It's basically a compliance checklist for AI systems.
Interesting.
Yeah. It helps police departments figure out if their systems meet all the requirements of the AI Act. Risk assessments, audits, documentation, the whole 9 yards.
So it's not just about ticking boxes, it's about actually making sure AI is used ethically and responsibly to actually make people safer.
Exactly.
I have to imagine all this regulation slows things down a bit though, right?
It's a balancing act for sure. But the EU is all about finding that balance between innovation and fundamental rights.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've covered red light AI and yellow light AI. What about the green light stuff? AI that's basically all good.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of that too. Things like chatbots, spam filters, AI that's considered low risk. There are some basic transparency rules like you have to know you're interacting with a machine and all that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's business as usual.
So it's not like they're trying to slam the brakes on AI altogether, just steer it in the right direction.
Exactly.
Okay, what else is in this act that people should know about?
Well, two things come to mind. First, they're really pushing for these regulatory sandboxes.
Regulatory sandbox.
Yeah, it's like a safe space to test out new AI tools in a controlled environment before they're released into the wild.
Oh, right. To make sure they actually work as intended and don't cause any unexpected problems.
Exactly. That way, developers can work out the kinks and identify any ethical concerns before these systems are used on the public.
That's smart. What was the second thing?
Transparency and accountability. Remember the black box problem we talked about?
Oh, yeah. How could I forget? It still kind of freaks me out to think about.
Well, the AI Act tries to address that head-on. It emphasizes the need for explainable AI. Basically, forcing developers to make these systems more transparent so we can understand how the AI is making its decisions.
So no more. The computer says no without any explanation.
Ideally, no. Especially for law enforcement applications, explainability is crucial. Imagine being denied entry to a country based on an AI system's risk assessment, but you have no idea why.
That would be incredibly frustrating and unfair.
Exactly. So being able to understand how these systems work is really important for protecting people's rights.
It also builds trust, right? If people feel like they understand how the system works, they're more likely to trust it.
Absolutely. But, it's not just about the technology itself. It's also about the people using it.
What do you mean?
The report talks about how we need to train law enforcement officers, not just on how to use these AI tools, but also on the ethical implications.
So they don't just blindly trust whatever the AI tells them.
Right. They need to be able to question the AI's recommendations, understand its limitations. That kind of critical thinking is going to be really important moving forward.
It's like AI can be a powerful tool, but it still needs a human brain to use it effectively and responsibly. So we've talked about how AI is changing the game for police in the EU and how the AI Act is trying to keep things in check. But I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Oh, absolutely. This report is very forward-looking. They're already thinking about challenges that are still on the horizon. And trust me, some of this stuff is pretty mind-blowing.
Okay, now you have to give me an example. What's keeping Europol up at night?
Well, for one thing, AI is getting so good at analyzing data, it can pick up on things humans might miss entirely, like subtle microexpressions, tiny changes in voice patterns, all sorts of things we'd never even noticed.
Okay.
So the report raises this really interesting question. What happens to the concept of evidence in a world where AI is analyzing everything?
Oh, wow, yeah. Like, imagine an AI that can tell if someone's lying based on their body language, even if a human jury wouldn't have a clue. Would that even hold up in court?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And it's not just about whether it's admissible, it's also about whether it's fair. Can we really trust an AI's judgment when we don't even understand how it reached its conclusions? And go back to that whole black box problem again.
Right, because the computer says you're guilty isn't exactly a very compelling legal argument, especially when we're talking about things as serious as, someone's freedom.
Exactly. And this is even more crucial when you're dealing with AI that's predicting criminal behavior or assessing risk. If a system flags someone as a potential threat, we need to know why. What data did it use to make that judgment? Was there any bias built into the system itself? These are really tough questions.
It's kind of scary when you think about it. It almost feels like we need a whole new set of laws just to deal with all this AI stuff.
Well, the report actually talks about that too. They say
Yeah.
we need to train law enforcement officers not just on how to use these AI tools,
Hmm.
but also on how to think critically about them.
So they don't just take the AI's word as gospel, basically.
Right. They need to be able to question its recommendations, understand its limitations, all of that. Because at the end of the day, AI should be augmenting human judgment, not replacing it.
AI as a tool, not a replacement. I like that. What else is on the horizon? What other challenges do they see coming down the pipeline?
Well, one big one is the need for international cooperation. Because obviously, crime doesn't stop at borders,
Yeah.
right? But with AI, things get even more complicated. Different countries have different rules, different ethical standards for how they develop and use AI.
It's like trying to solve a global problem with every country working from a different playbook.
Exactly. So the report really emphasizes the need for international standards and agreements on AI in law enforcement, like common safeguards to make sure people's rights are protected no matter where they are in the world.
Okay, so the EU is trying to lead the way here, but they can't do it alone. It's going to take a global effort to make sure AI is actually a force for good in law enforcement.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, this deep dive has given me a lot to think about. So, to wrap things up here, what's the key takeaway for our listeners? Why is it so important to be paying attention to all of this?
Because the way we develop and use AI is going to have a huge impact on all of our lives, whether we realize it or not. It's not just about catching criminals. It's about protecting our rights, our freedoms, in a world where technology is advancing faster than ever.
It's about making sure that future is one we actually want to live in, not one we just sleepwalk into.
Exactly. And that takes awareness, it takes engagement, and honestly, a little healthy skepticism is a good thing too. Don't be afraid to ask tough questions. How does this work? Who benefits? What could go wrong?
That's what I love about these deep dives, They give you the knowledge you need to ask those questions, to have informed opinions, to really engage in these important conversations we need to be having as a society.
Well said. Knowledge is power, right?
Hmm.
And in the age of AI, we need all the power we can get.
That is a wrap on AI and policing in the EU. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating look into the world around us.